Well, look who's back again. It's me, because I can't stop talking about Teenage Turtles. Hey, it's Ali. Welcome back to my channel. You saw the title. I'm talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles again. Why are we surprised? Now, I said in my previous video that I wanted to do a little thing about Rise, and a lot of you were down for that, but I realized that I kind of just didn't want to do like a plot recap. I feel like that would be a little too boring for my taste. So I decided, let me look into something else that I could talk about, maybe some theories, which is, again, still something I want to talk about. That's not what this video is about, but if you want to talk about fan theories and also just Tumblr and the craziness, the crazy goodness that comes out of the Tumblr fandom, I would love to talk about that as well and do a deep dive on that. But that's not what today's video about. Today's video, I was trying to look for something to talk about, and then the animatic for what was going to be the alternate opening to the Rise movie came out, and I was like, wow, that's dark. And then I thought about the criticisms this show has, and I was like, maybe I should talk about the fact that a lot of y'all really did not like Rise because of how not dark it is, and then also didn't like the movie because of how dark it is. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. How dark should Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles be? If at any time you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe, because I make videos like this all the time, and comment down below if you think a TMNT is too dark, if it should be lighthearted, if it should not be lighthearted. Let's start a conversation and let's get into it. So like I said, what brought this on was actually two pieces of TMNT media that I have recently consumed and were pretty dark that I wanted to talk about. The first, like I said, being the Rise alternate opening animatic for the movie. And wow, it's dark. It's dark. I'll play some clips while I talk, but sheesh, bro. So spoilers for the movie, by the way, because I'm going to be diving deep into that and the implications of the opening and all of that. So spoilers, if you haven't watched the movie, go watch the movie. Go watch the movie. So a little recap, the Rise movie followed future Casey, who came from the future to warn the Mad Dogs about the impending Krang invasion that kills all life as we know it on Earth. In this, we get to see that Leo and Mikey, future Leo and Mikey, are the only survivors, and it is heavily implied that Raph and Donnie have died and passed away, and so is Splinter. I forgot to mention that, actually, originally in my script. Splinter is also, implied to have passed away as well. And then it is even more heavily implied after that Mikey sacrifices himself in order to send future Casey into the past to warn the Mad Dogs, because he has to open the portal for him. And then it's also implied that Leo also dies in order to because that timeline is doomed. We'll get into that in a second. But there's a lot of death in the beginning. But in the original opening, it's all basically implied. No one says anything. No one says, oh, this person is dead. No one says that. It's all implied, and it's all with this future doomed timeline. So the alternate animatic that recently came out with, I think it was a panel. It was a panel at a con. I don't know which con, but it was a panel at a con very recently where some of the creators came out and showed the alternate animatic that they had made for what would have been the opening for the movie. So in this alternate animatic, we get to see Leo basically trying to corral what is left of the people of New York and the yokai and mutes of New York and stuff, corral them together and try to, fight against an impending invasion of the Krang. Again, everything is post-apocalyptic. Leo is much older, etc. Mikey is trying to open a portal to go into the past. That is still the same plot. However, in this, we see that Casey wants to be the one to do it, and Leo's just kind of no, you're not ready, which implies that they had been training him this whole time, which I have seen such sad comics of that on Tumblr. Y'all are sick for that. Okay, tears in my eyes. I always reblog that and say tears in my eyes, because tears in my actual eyes. Anyway, it obviously, the Krang catches up to them before they can open the portal, and everyone's fighting, and then we get to literally see everyone die. Everyone aside from Leo, Mikey, and Casey, who were the ones who just were the only ones at the end in the beginning of the actual movie. And we actually get to see it. We actually get to see them fight and die. And it's very, I don't want to say unceremoniously, but it kind of is unceremoniously. We're just if you knew nothing about what this movie was about, I can see how if you were just going into this movie and immediately you see April die, you see Jackson die, you see Todd die, you see all these characters just die, actually get defeated and die. And this, you'd be huh? oh wait, let's calm down, let's roll it back, that's really, really dark. So then Leo is like, he was gonna be the one, I think, to go back in time, but then he had to fight off the Krang, so he sends Casey in his stead, and it is even more heavily implied that everybody is dead in that timeline, and that timeline is doomed, which makes me feel so bad for future Casey. So there, you're caught up on what that animatic was. And yeah, if you haven't noticed, that is a lot darker than the original opening for this movie. I mean, there's even a shot where you can see Raph and Donnie's shells, just their shells, hung up in memoriam on the wall. That got a lot of people. Like, the clips I'm showing were actually from a live stream. I don't know, actually. There are two different clips, but like one of the clips I saw were from a live stream, and you can see everybody in the chat just going, what is going on? It was, yeah, it caught me by surprise too. I was like, oh my God, like y'all just gonna show that? Like, dang. Well, it's clear that that's probably the reason why it didn't actually become the actual opening of the show, or the movie, sorry, because it's really dark. I stated in my last video about TMNT how when the show first came out, it was constantly compared to Teen Titans Go, which had come out like years and years prior. It was criticized for being too kiddie and bright and sunny, when the previous iteration before it had a much darker tone. But like still obviously was comedic as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We'll get to that. But the 2012, while it did have a darker tone, there were still a lot of elements of like comedy, which is funny because sometimes a lot of the darker moments in that show are like kind of toned down by the comedy. But like when the fandom talks about it, they're like, that's a little weird. Why are we laughing about this? Bro was literally tortured. Of course, however, the people who were very critical of this in the beginning, a lot of them got over themselves, especially if they were TMNT fans, like actual fans. A lot of them actually gave the show a shot and ended up liking it. You need to look no further than YouTube. If you were to just look up Rise TMNT essay, you'll find like half of them being like, oh, I was wrong about Rise. The show actually ended up being good. Yeah, I know. And I'm about to be an elitist for a second because I was here on day one. Okay? Where were you? I'm joking. I'm literally joking. I'm joking. However, I also like every iteration of TMNT to some extent. That includes the Michael Bay movies. I said I liked them. I didn't say they were good. Also, unironically, one of my favorite movies of just all time is the 2007 TMNT movie. I actually watched it last night. Great movie. It's an enjoyable movie. Anyway, back on topic to these people's criticisms, though I am happy that they changed their mind. Is the show too kiddie? I think this is a really hard one to answer because TMNT constantly swings back and forth between the pendulum of being dark and gritty and super like unserious and happy and fun. The original like concept for TMNT started out somewhere in the middle. Like, it wasn't too dark. Like, I literally read, if you read the synopsis of the first run of the first comics of TMNT, it's silly, it's crazy, but also you can see at the same time how it would be like a little bit more serious, like on comic books. Honestly, most comic books are like that, where they swing between being more serious and completely silly, and that's just because of the demographic. Like, the demographic is still for younger people and people who are a little bit more nerdy, so it's, you know, it's obvious that you probably will have some like comics that are more on the serious side while also having a healthy dose of humor. So TMNT is the same way. It's hard to be super serious though. It's a bunch of teenage turtles and a rat who is their dad. Be fucking for real, please. You can't be fucking for real. Your dad's a rat. But much like Batman, honestly, in a way, where Batman comics kind of started out a little bit more lighthearted, even if there were more serious like things going on in the comics, it still started out pretty lighthearted, and Batman just got darker and darker and grittier and constantly stayed that way, to the point where if you try to do anything fun with Batman, it is met with heavy amounts of criticism. Look no further than Lego Batman. Lego Batman is the best iteration of the Joker and Batman dynamic. If you don't agree, you're homophobic. And similarly, like I said, TMNT, you know, started off somewhere between comedic and serious and has gone both ways, being, you know, heavily marketable and super duper like fun and silly, and oh, they eat pizza now, they love pizza, probably just to sell pizza, but hey, they like pizza now. And then also just like, oh my god, the Shredder killed our dad. Like, you know, that like serious super overtone like that. So it's hard to like pinpoint which like type is the best, which is why this kind of like criticism is not lost on me, but it's kind of like a mute point. Like, I believe like there's a time and a place for everything. However, this show, going back to the animatic, this show and then this movie, it's wondering like, should we have gone that dark with it? And I agree to a certain extent. I feel like the movie itself was perfect in its balance between dark and comedic. This was a little bit more darker than the rest of the tone of the show, which I liked. And considering if we had eventually gotten a third season, we could see how that would kind of shift into a little bit more of a darker, serious tone as they take on harder and harder enemies, and maybe enemies that are trying to be more serious. Like Draxum in the beginning was trying to be super serious, and then like over time he just got super silly because they just like chose to not take him that seriously. And I feel like that would be interesting to see, especially with Krang, because right now the Krang are super fucking scary. This is the scariest iteration of the Krang out of all of the other iterations. Isn't that crazy? Even the 2012 version, which is the version that is like the darkest out of the shows so far, I would say the 2012 is the darkest, and yet the Krang weren't as scary as they were in Rise in the movie. Isn't that crazy? But I think that Rise specifically, like I said, has striked that balance between dark and unserious. Like in the same breath that these turtles are going to sing about a snow day and Booty Shaker 9000, then it could be said in the same breath we talk about insecurities, family dynamics, and interpersonal relationships. And that's exactly what Rise did. If you actually pay attention, there are more serious and low-key darker themes that happen in the show. I think these themes tend to get amplified by the fandom a lot because the fandom, you know, has free reign to do whatever. They can make darker tones and darker headcanons and all this type of stuff. They can do that because, you know, it's fandom. We can do whatever we want. But also at the same time, I think that people think that like it's just fandom making this up, but actually it's really coming from the canon itself. It's sometimes it's just a little line or a little thing that is taken and we're going, huh? Like if you've seen this beautiful video, I forgot who it's done by, but it talks about Leo's insecurity complex throughout the show. And it's not something, if you just watch the show and you just turn off your brain and just watch the show, you probably aren't going to notice until one episode where he's with Splinter and they're fighting in Big Mama's like battle nexus, and he just says to Splinter straight up, why does no one believe in me? Why does no one trust me? I've talked about this in other episodes, other videos too, but like what, that is low-key, if you're just watching the show, such a random moment to bring up, unless you really are paying attention to the show and you're paying attention to the way in which everyone is treating Leo and the way in which Leo is acting, which like, go watch that video. That video is so good about that. So these moments that come from the fandom that are a lot darker in tone come from actual canon moments in the show, which again, if we were getting a season 3, maybe they would have explored. It found that balance between the classic action storytelling and fun, funky quirks, which led to what we know as TMNT today. In fact, that is what a lot of modern cartoons are doing these days. Why? Because y'all underestimate children. I constantly see this time and time again, especially with newer cartoons that are coming out. Like, people get so surprised when a show suddenly goes a little bit darker, or even as dark as it is, like something like the Owl House. People are surprised. We're like, how did we get from point A to point B? And it's like, really, it's all just a setup. Like all of this, like, oh, week to week shenanigans, yada yada, that is all a setup for the darker tones that they want to show. These kids can handle it. Kids deserve to have shows where it's a little bit darker in theme. And when I say dark, I don't mean like gory or like, you know, like adult animation usually tends to be, which is just gory and dark for the sake of being dark, gory, and what's the word? Provocative for the sake of being provocative because it's an adult cartoon show. Another conversation for another day. I promise I'm making that video one day. But instead, in this kids' cartoons, it's just conversations that are a little bit more negative and a little bit more like, not everything has to have a happy ending. How do you deal with something that is bittersweet, like the ending to Amphibia, for example? How do you deal with something like that? And kids deserve to have that. They deserve to have shows that teach them those lessons as they grow up, because that's what they're going to be dealing with in real life. But anyway, back to the alternate animatic. Despite everything I said about, like, you know, it being dark or whatever, I think that this alternate opening would have been too much for the opening of this movie, not just because of what I said with like it kind of happening out of nowhere and being a shock to the senses, especially if you weren't taking the show super seriously and you were just watching it for fun, like most actual kids of the demographic of the show are. Now us, obviously the fandom, is probably watching the show in a little bit more of a critical light, so when we see something like that, we are shocked, but in a good way. A little kid may be shocked, but not in a not so great way. But I don't think that's the actual reason why I don't think this worked. I think that this didn't work because it gave too much away. I think for the sake of time and storytelling, Leo's character, especially his older character, this opening gives too much away of Leo's character. A lot of current Leo's character development in this movie comes from the fact that Casey from the future comes and tells him like, oh my god, you're like this great ninja in the future and you're literally the best and blah 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 blah. And Leo is trying to act on that assumption and be like, oh, I'm the best, so I must be the best of where I'm at currently. Like, he is thinking to himself, right now, the way that I'm acting right now is completely fine. I'm just going to be even better in the future when I defeat the Krang all by myself or whatever. And so he's like not putting two and two together that future Leo had to go through so much shit, like his family dying, just for him to be the turtle that he is in the future that is well respected. And so seeing too much of that future Leo probably would have frustrated, like, I like that the audience is kept in the dark kinda about that and left to imply the way current Leo is left to imply about that in the future. He is left to imply that, oh, in the beginning of the movie, he's left to imply that, oh, I must be great as I am now, and I'm just going to get older and better and better and better and better, and I don't have to do anything to get to that point. I just have to be myself. And by the end of the movie, he realizes, it's never spoken, but I'm sure he realizes by the end of the movie through his character development that the reason why Leo is able to become who he is in the future is through sacrifice and through stepping up as a leader. In fact, there are a lot of headcanons that like show that like Leo only became leader. Like technically he's been leader since Splinter gave him the leader, but he really only became the leader that he is supposed to be because Raph and Donnie died, and then he had to step up, which is very sad. And then some of you sickos out there really have it so that Leo actually only stepped up because it is his fault, like his direct fault, that his brothers died because of his arrogance. Y'all are sick. Those of you out there who are doing that, y'all are sick for that. Sick. Make more of it, please. I'm sorry, angst makes me sad. I can only handle so much angst, but the TMNT, y'all be pulling angst out the wazoo. Like I said, but it's not out the wazoo. It's from these actual shows and just things that happen in the show that people think we're just gonna brush by, but it's like, no, sit down and think about it for a little second. That's traumatizing. Like the aftermath fix in comics that people are making from the aftermath of the movie. Oh, like I said, y'all want a theory and deep dive fandom video? Let me know. Side note, if this show ever does get a third season, I would love to see Leo being more of a direct leader, trying to direct missions, trying to direct the team and build up the team the way that we get to actually see Raph do in the show and fail at it. Like, even though he's gone through all this character development in the movie, he's not going to be a great leader right away. In fact, in the movie, I would argue and criticize that they didn't actually show Leo being a leader. They showed him what he needs to do personally for him to be in the position of leader actually, but in terms of actually leading his brothers, that's actually something in a lot of TMNT I don't get to see. So I would love to see in this, like, him actually trying to be a good leader to his brothers and be a good brother, even though he's not the oldest. And I like to see also Raph still be an older brother and take on that older brother role that he does in the show, like the overprotective older brother, like that episode with Mikey going on his own mission. That was more of an overprotective brother thing than it was like a leader thing. So I would like to see that and how that would interact with Leo being leader this time. Like, maybe Raph is still being overprotective of Leo because that's his younger brother. It would just be nice to see. It would be nice to see. Okay, I'm not being delusional. It's called manifesting. But yes, I think that this animatic would have given us way too much information, and I'm glad they stuck with what they did. Now to talk about another darker series of TMNT real quick, the IDW comic book series. No spoilers, because I myself just started, like, I'm still on volume 1. There are like 13 volumes in this series of the 2020 IDW comics, and then there's the like continuation of the series in the 2022 run. So like, no spoilers here, but wow, does this get dark. The comic immediately starts off with angst. Raph is missing. That's not a spoiler. That's literally the plot of the first issue of the first comic. Raph is missing, and in fact he didn't even get to grow up with his brothers. tears in my eyes. Why can't we leave Raph alone, please? Anyway, these comics definitely lean more towards a Batman-esque type of comic. It's definitely more dark, and I find myself loving this obviously as just as much as the Rise show. Duh. Comics are shorter sometimes, so it leads sometimes to character development feeling like it's a little bit rushed, but I feel like they do a good job of like kind of striking that balance between like, oh, we need to give this character development. I feel like a lot of the character development comes through their own solo issues that they get to have, especially Mikey, because Mikey doesn't get to have that, and they get to explore not darker themes, but a little bit more serious, melancholy themes, like each of the turtles' own way of wanting to be above the surface, especially Donnie and Mikey. Like Donnie and Mikey crave like community outside of their brothers and on the surface and with humans or even yokai kind. They haven't gotten that yet so far in the series, and through those solo issues we get to see them kind of like longing for that, especially Mikey, which I think is like really good for Mikey, because Mikey is the extrovert of an extrovert of an extrovert. Like he needs to talk to people, he needs community, and I feel like that is like a good character development for his character and a good way to talk about darker themes without getting like too dark. I put it in quotations. So I just bring the IDW comics up to show the different ways in which darker undertones can be input in here. And I don't actually, now that I'm thinking about it, darker undertones probably isn't the right word. It's probably just more serious and more non-lighthearted. Like it's not necessarily dark, like people die, even though the IDW comics is a lot more darker in terms of like violence and death and like all that type of stuff and that actual darker tones. But as it relates to Rise, we can have more serious conversations is what I mean to say. We can have these more serious conversations while having that. I think Rise and the IDW comic book run, they can run congruently with each other, which they kind of have been, because of the fact that two separate people obviously are writing these, and it's two separate vibes, but touching on the same basis, touching on the same interpersonal relationships between the brothers that are important to the core of the brothers, and developing them in their own way, with the IDW comics being more gritty and more Batman-esque, where the Rise is more Teen Titans Go-esque, and I don't think that is a bad thing. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. If you did, you are a real one. This was really fun to do. I like doing this a little bit more, you know, deep divey stuff. So if you want to see that deep dive, if you want me to make a 4th video on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, let me know. I mean, I will be making a video probably about the 2012, because I'm gonna rewatch that, and then 2003, which I started watching last night. So let me know if you want to see that in the comments. You can reach me on all my social medias. As for what's coming up, the Sonic show, I think I have one more weekend before that comes out. I don't actually remember, but the Sonic show review, reaction, whatever, that'll be out. And then I said OKKO, but I'm actually consolidating that into like one big video about animation this year and canceled TV shows, because I just found out Craig of the Creek is getting canceled technically. They get to end properly, they get to end their show, but they were still cut short and technically canceled, and I want to talk about that because I think that's a really serious topic within animation that we need to talk about. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below your thoughts. Reach me on all my social medias. I make TikToks, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Tumblr, of course, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.